I think there is a groundswell of conservatism in both the United States and in people, especially under about 50. And it's particularly prominent in people in their 20s. But the problem is that it's also very radical. I've been in quite a bit of trouble for calling it a woke right that answers, the woke left. So rather than focusing on the idea of building prosperity and individual liberty and all of the things that have made America great so far so that we can apply those and make America great again, they're leaning into their own identity politics. There's also a very radical contingent on the right that if we don't actually pay attention to this is how we lose 26 and 28 completely, because everybody's rightly horrified by that behavior, the identity politics in particular, the anti-Semitism, which is basically the definition of being on X now, is dealing with anti-Semitic and racist content on the daily basis. This will sink the Republican ship before the next stage of MAGA, whatever that looks like.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Michele Tafoya podcast. Hit that subscribe button wherever you are. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. Just subscribe. You never want to miss an episode. We've got so many good ones in the can already that are in the catalog for you, and so many good ones coming down the line, including today, James Lindsay, anti-communist. This guy has done so much work, so much study, and he's enlightens us on the realities of socialism, fascism, communism. Why are people like Ilhan Omar and Zoran Mamdani, we all get those consonants backwards now and then. I've been called Toyofa many, many times. Anyway, Mamdani, why are they getting traction? Why is this socialist movement getting traction? The answer is pretty simple. The solutions are a little more complex. You're going to want to hear from James Lindsay. This is fascinating. Stay tuned. James Lindsay, welcome back. It's good to see you. Your stuff keeps growing. New discourses. Just give a plug for New Discourses. What can people expect when they go check that out?
Yeah, I made New Discourses to be a platform where I can deliver my research to the public as fast as I can do it. So if you want to know the most up-to-date stuff that I'm doing to present podcasts, articles, videos, and so on to expose communism, to expose fascism, all of these totalitarian ideologies, you can find it there. I'm doing a big series right now exposing Nazism and its actual history, reading through pieces of Mein Kampf so people can see in Hitler's own words what his intentions were.
It's fascinating stuff, and it's stuff that I think people, they either weren't exposed to it, haven't been exposed to it on the school level, or choose to look at it in we keep hearing people say, but socialism can work if we do it the right way. I love the meme, James, where someone is standing in front of a big outlet with a huge fork saying, but we'll do it right this time, For a long time, I've been telling you about my friends at besthotgrill.com. So if you're tired of replacing your grill every couple of years, you'll want to check out the Hot Fast Solaire Infrared Grill from besthotgrill.com. I have one of these. It is amazing. Solaire makes these amazing American grills that heat up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes. Yeah, I said that right. 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes. Solaire infrared grills eliminate flare-ups and consistently make the tastiest, juiciest, most flavorful food. The Solaire infrared grills heat your food directly, not the air around the food like conventional grills do. And Solaire's been making infrared grills for 20 years and has really dialed in the design. Experience the Solaire infrared grill firsthand with the Solaire demo rental program. This is a great idea. You can try Solaire before you buy with the foods your family always enjoys, burgers, chicken, steak, without a salesman breathing down your neck, and see why Solaire is the last grill you will ever buy. Learn more at besthotgrill.com. besthotgrill.com. Try before you buy with the Solaire demo rental program at besthotgrill.com. I love the meme, James, where someone is standing in front of a big outlet with a huge fork saying, but we'll do it right this time,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Another great meme for socialism is it shows the boot coming down to smash an artist who's painting a sunshine, happy picture on it, and it says Western Youth on the painter. And socialism is the boot coming down. They
Yeah.
think it's going to be sunshine and roses, and it's going to stamp them out, actually.
And so it's really alarming, given what you and I know and are well aware of, that others are either choosing not to see it, are still ignorant of the facts, or are naive to the reality of what stuff is really about. Given that, I want to play a few clips for you. The premise I invited you under was, let's talk about how people like Ilhan Omar get elected in a state like Minnesota, and now a guy running for mayor of Minneapolis, and a guy running for mayor of New York City. But we'll start with Ilhan Omar. I want to run a recent piece of tape, which to me, it's hard to watch a U.S. congressperson saying what she says and still being lauded as a patriot. Go ahead and roll it, Misty.
In a dictatorship. And I don't even remember ever witnessing anything like that. To have a democracy, a beacon of hope for the world to now be turned into one of the worst countries where the military are in our streets without any regard for people's constitutional rights, while our president is spending millions of dollars propping himself up like a failed dictator with a military parade.
So that is prior to that military parade that was held in Washington, D.C., and obviously in response to what's going on with ICE and immigration and deportations, which, by the way, were just as active during Obama's term. How does someone like this get elected in a state like Minnesota? So you all know I spent nearly 3 decades on the sidelines, from the NFL to the NBA to the Olympic Games, you name it. And I've learned that real expertise comes from consistency, not guesswork. And that's why I'm excited to team up with Sports Corner Daily. Their free daily picks keep cashing, with analysis so clear even a casual fan can cash in. And with the NFL and all the other big matchups, college football right around the corner, there's no better time to get in on the action. My listeners get 2 expert picks delivered free every single day. Just text BETS to 321-448-0691 or visit sportsdailypick.com to sign up in seconds. No cost, no risk, just smart winning insights. That's BETS, BETS, to 321-448-0691 or head to sportsdailypick.com. Don't wait. Kick off the season on the winning side. So that is prior to that military parade that was held in Washington, D.C., and obviously in response to what's going on with ICE and immigration and deportations, which, by the way, were just as active during Obama's term. How does someone like this get elected in a state like Minnesota?
Yeah, well, I mean, just also to point out, am I mistaken that this military parade was actually the celebration of the birthday of the Army, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like that's a justifiable reason to have a military parade, to celebrate the military, literally.
Yeah.
But at any rate, how does somebody get elected like this? Well, we've had 30 years of red-washed education in the United States, and in blue states, Minnesota being the only state in the famous election of Ronald Reagan that went to the Democrats. In Minnesota and these other blue states like California, New York, and so on, which of course is relevant as well, it's much worse. And this red-washed education has not taught the history of subversive movements and the history of communism, the history of socialism at all. We hear from the critical race theory side of things, we have whitewashed education that glazes over the real history of white supremacy, which is absolutely absurd. Our education is awash with this. It's almost all anybody learns. But on the other hand, we don't learn the history of communism. I used to go around and do talks all over the country and ask this question and just, show of hands, who's heard of the Holodomor? Who can name Lenin's first name? And everybody yells John, which turns out not to be the right answer. It's a different Lenin. But, I would ask these basic questions about communism. And the only one that more than 4 or 5% of the audience would raise their hand for would be who has heard of the Killing Fields, which were the gigantic mass murder episode by Pol Pot in Cambodia. And about a quarter of the audience would raise their hand for that. But that's not because of our schools. That's because they made a movie about it.
Right.
And so our education system hasn't covered this. And instead, it has in fact done the opposite. Our education system is based off of something called critical pedagogy and has been since the 1990s. It really got implemented in full force, though, after 2015's Every Student Succeeds Act. So it took over our colleges of education by the mid-1990s, and critical pedagogy is derived from the ideas of a Marxist named Paulo Freire, who was a Brazilian, and Paulo Freire's idea was called education for liberation. We always hear that word liberation in association with communist movements now. And his idea was that what you'll do is you'll use the educational material, a math lesson, a reading lesson, a writing lesson, it doesn't matter, history, science, you name it, as an excuse to set up a political conversation in the classroom. And the point of the political conversation was derived from Mao Zedong's mass line, which is where you find out what's already agitating the masses, you spin it into communism, then you feed it back to them in order to radicalize them. He called it conscientization. And so the idea was to awaken them to a critical consciousness that would make them into socialists, that would make them want to rebel and revolt against the existing system. And our education system has been controlled by this for, like I said, 30 years. Our media has taken up the doctrine of the critical theorist or Marxist named Herbert Marcuse, who also derived his skills from Mao Zedong's reign in China in the 1950s in particular, and some in the 1960s. He loved the Cultural Revolution. He said in 1969, certainly today, every Marxist who's not a communist of strict obedience, meaning an old school Marxist, is a Maoist. That's what he said in 69. And so he laid out a doctrine called repressive tolerance in 1965. And the idea, he says, that the answer to a repressive society is what he calls liberating tolerance. And liberating tolerance is going to sound very familiar to you. His definition for this, word for word, was we will extend tolerance to movements from the left and withdraw tolerance from movements from the right, including to the speech, the extension of giving the word before the deed. The idea, he said, was not just censorship, but pre-censorship, so that the right-wing idea could never enter the minds of the population. And we've been raising our kids through our media apparatuses, both entertainment and news media, under this doctrine. Why did we have so-called fiery but mostly peaceful protests?
Yeah.
That was repressive or the liberating tolerance. Every double standard that you can see that the left has cooked the books for itself for the last several decades, but especially the last 5 years, is liberating tolerance in action. So Ilhan Omar and these other socialist candidates represent the fruit of that program. So where you have strong leftist strongholds, including these big cities, but also these heavily Democrat-run states, you have this liberating tolerance mindset, and you have the critical consciousness education from Paulo Freire have combined to make a population that can't think otherwise.
Fortunately, some of us do, James, think otherwise and see clearly through it, or probably not as analytically as you have. So do you have an answer? Like it seems like this wheel is spinning and someone needs to throw some sand into the gears. I think that sand is being thrown. Obviously, we had the election of Donald Trump. That represents to me that a lot of blue collar workers who didn't go to prestigious colleges and universities and get this stuff fed to them are going, what the hell are you talking about? No. Is this the beginning of the pushback, or are we going to be battling this for a long, long time?
The answer is kind of both. And, to your blue collar example, you even have Senator John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, who's very frequently like, what the heck are you guys doing? Have we lost our minds? And you're seeing this kind of, I wouldn't say it's a wave, but this at least trickle of state representatives and state senators at that level who are Democrats who have finally found a line they won't cross, whether it's the trans medical issue or the trans women sports issue. It's a lot with that, actually, or whether it's some of these absolutely absurd socialist things. They're finally starting to walk away. Even people at the state representative level are starting to walk away from the Democratic Party. Sean Theory in Houston, Texas is a great example of that, to name one. She just drew a line and said, I can't go against my values, ends up leaving the Democratic Party, supporting Donald Trump in the previous election. So we are throwing sand in the gears, and that's why they're throwing this gigantic fit and mounting this gigantic pushback. You see this guy that wants to run for mayor in Minneapolis saying he's going to Trump-proof the city. Well, what does that mean? They're going to make sure that Trump can't keep throwing sand in their gears is what it actually means.
Yeah.
So we're actually doing it. But again, not that I'm going to hold up Donald Trump on this magical pedestal, but he has some good ideas. And one of his best ideas was to turn these things around on these people. So if you recall, everybody knows that Donald Trump is very famous. They attacked him for this, for saying fake news media, right? The fake news media, the fake news media. Well, a lot of people have forgotten that Donald Trump didn't invent that turn of phrase. The left used it against Trump first, and Trump turned it around and said, no, you're the fake news media, right? And so this idea of being able to kind of turn their agitations around actually is pretty effective. I've seen a little bit of a meme campaign online. It hasn't really caught on yet, but it's had a little beginning where, this guy says that he wants to Trump-proof Minneapolis, and people are posting pictures of, the horrible things Democrat cities are suffering and said this city is Trump-proofed, right? And so to make it look like that's what that means, right?
Yeah.
And same thing with the anti-socialist memes have gone crazy since this Mamdani guy in New York City won the Democratic primary there. So educating people about the realities of socialism, I think, will be a necessary antidote. These meme campaigns will be a necessary antidote. But also, we need to start telling the better story. The socialist story reaches into a place of despair and losing and envy and resentment. And we have to start telling the story of the American dream again, because people will start to believe it if we articulate it strongly. And when people believe in it, they don't want socialism. They want to engage in the American dream and build a productive life.
Right. And you're right. We have to amplify those who have achieved it. And I'm so tired of people like Sonny Hostin and Whoopi Goldberg telling us, well, they're the exceptions. Well, anyone who lives an exceptional life is an exception. I would call Whoopi Goldberg an exception. I would call Sonny Hostin an exception. I would call my life kind of exceptional, not to that level. But I also know that I worked really freaking hard to become to carve out an exceptional life for myself and my family. Let's talk about Mamdani again here. I want to just play, this is a recent clip from earlier when, it seems to me that he looks great. He's charismatic, but he throws out these insane ideas that are so antithetical to what we're built on here in America that now his press team is having to kind of shut him up because there are limits as to what they want him to say. Go ahead and roll this, Misty.
Further and further, such that it reflects the beauty and the breadth of our city. Thank you for your question, Ms.
I think we're done here.
Channel 7,
We're going to go. Come on.
we haven't had a chance to
We're wrapping up. Sorry, folks.
Okay.
We're wrapping up. I'm so sorry, guys.
Sorry. Can we just talk about this notion that
My favorite part of that clip is they had to cue the band in order to drown out the reporter's question and give Mamdani an excuse to leave that stage. Great smile. Thank you for your question. I want to, amplify the beauty of all the residents in New York. It's this stuff, the smiling, great words, good looking, charismatic figure behind it is what is so frightening. Go ahead.
I mean, he looks like he's on laughing gas, honestly. His smile's a little bit over the top. It's like he looks like he just came from the dentist and had a pretty good procedure going there. But I'm sorry, it just looks like an actor. But
I agree with that.
Yeah, he's got a great smile, but it's like it doesn't feel organic to the situations that he's in. Like he's being asked.
And also, if really quick, if that were Donald Trump up there and someone were saying to him, and I only use him as an example because he's giving others a lot of spine by his example, he would never stop talking because an advisor or a counselor or a cabinet member or a press secretary told him to. He would take every question. Keep going.
Yeah, he actually pushes people out of the way to keep doing it. So it's a stark difference there. And of course, the fake news media doesn't treat him that way. But so the idea here is that, they can't take the tough questions. If they are faced with the tough questions, they have to paper it over. Like you said, he says these kind of very nice sounding phrases. And I'm going to be very analytical on you again, but he says, I just want to highlight the beauty of all New Yorkers or whatever, right? Well, all, believe it or not here, all is a tricky word. This is a weaselly politician word. Socialists use the word all or everybody or whatever, education for all, right? They always use it, and they use it in a very selective way. They have an assumption baked into it, which is that currently we are not doing that certain people are marginalized and held off to the center. So what he's actually able to do is to throw out a signal to the socialists that what he means is, I'm going to elevate the people like socialists that are marginalized. We're going to bring them up higher in the circumstances, and we're going to use, people who are losing within the system, whether that's probably not racial minorities, they don't like him very much, but probably more along the lines of criminals and illegal aliens. We're going to elevate those people more and more, the beauty of all New Yorkers, right? And we're going to therefore have to get other people out of the way. The term for this is decentering. You're going to decenter the existing New York people and recenter the socialists. And they use this language all the time. So even in the tiny little thing where they had to shuffle him out of the way, he already said something that, if you speak socialist and understand the assumptions behind what they said, indicates that he's still giving the socialist answer. Now, any politician would do that. You can say, James, you're overreading it, except that statement after statement after statement on, say, X that he's made in the past, especially in 2020, is not just socialist. It's absolutely quoting Karl Marx directly, communism. Workers of the world unite, seize the means of production. He said these things.
Yeah, that one was rather illuminating and terrifying to me. You mentioned here in Minneapolis, I live in Minnesota, and a guy running for office here is Omar Fatah, however you pronounce it, Fatah, I'm not 100% sure, but he is trying to follow the Mamdani model of putting a lot of video out there. Get out on TikTok, Instagram, X. And let's just roll one of the pieces of propaganda he has produced. Go ahead, Misty.
Everyone keeps asking me, Omar, why aren't you doing more videos? As a state senator with a second full-time job and a kid on the way, I just haven't been able to find the time. I've also been fighting for you, passing things like tuition-free college for working-class families, rideshare protections for our Uber and Lyft drivers, and the legalization of fentanyl testing strips. But this summer, you're going to be seeing a lot more of me, because we deserve nice things in Minneapolis too. To make an affordable Minneapolis that works for everyone, we need a mayor that works as hard as you do. I'm ready to work hard to, 1, build a Minneapolis that working people can afford to call home. 2, protect our city from a hostile White House. And 3, diversify our city's public safety response. By increasing the minimum wage to $20 by 2028 and passing rent stabilization to stop price gouging and incentivizing new construction, we can protect workers. Protecting all of our communities from Donald Trump means not letting MPD interact with ICE, whether it's for an immigration raid or not. Our residents deserve a mayor that will stand up to Donald Trump and say, no, not in our community. Did you know that the city's own data showed that 47% of calls to MPD can be diverted to non-police response? Cops aren't social workers. Investments in programs like these ensure that the appropriate response arrives when we call 911. And we can actually free up police resources to focus on violent crime that detracts from community safety. Oh, I'm sorry. It's my campaign managers again. They've been on my case all week about make more videos. I'll find the time tomorrow.
Well, he starts by reminding you that he's a state senator who, with another full-time job with a child on the way, to try to humanize himself, and then goes off into these, I think we heard some of those socialist buzzwords that you talked about.
Yeah.
What stood out to you?
The whole thing, really. But he said, what, a Minneapolis that works for everybody. It's exactly the thing I just said. I did see that clip floating around. But when you speak socialist, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And then what did he do? He channeled it directly into the workers, right?
Yeah.
So workers of the world unite is kind of in the backdrop. So he has this whole thing that's doing the exact same socialist messaging, the exact same Marxist messaging. It's a little bit more polished, but what his entire presentation, other than the very, very fake ending, reminded me of is it just reminds me of the kinds of things that were said in places like China under Mao and in Soviet Union, only in kind of a hip, upbeat kind of, American way. The rent, that he's going to do rent stabilization to prevent price gouging, which implies, of course, that they're going to go after the landlords. Landlords have been one of the biggest targets of communists all along from 1917 forward, and probably earlier than that in their writings. They had no political power before 1917 anywhere. But attacking landlords and accusing them of price gouging, when in fact most of them run pretty tight margins, is a very common scapegoating tactic, in particular that communists use. People are struggling with their high rents. Their point of contact is the landlord. That's who they give the check to. That's where they feel the pain. But the landlord's usually just passing on costs that have raised from other places. And so it's very easy to demonize the landlord. That's a very common communist tactic. And so they're going to implement state control of pricing, which will actually harm both the landlords and the tenants. But it looks like it's going to help the tenants and punish the greedy landlords.
Why would you explain to people why it will hurt the tenants? Because I think that's where people will go, well, how could it hurt us if you're keeping the rent stable?
Because when the rent becomes stabilized, as he's phrasing it, that's a nice euphemism. When the rent becomes controlled by the state, what happens is that the decent landlords are pushed out of business and they're replaced by state bureaucrats in some cases. And in other cases, the housing that they operate actually collapses. So your choices for sound housing go down. Literally, you go from living in an apartment to living in a project. And that is a massive diminishment of your standard of living and quality of life, because what happens is when you control those prices, you're actually making it more expensive for the landlord than he can bring in rent, which is now controlled. So he can't actually, it's not even about turning profit. He can't even break even running his properties. And so what happens is they lose control of their properties fall into worse hands. If they can get a private owner, the private owners got less money that they can work with, so things are going to fall apart. If the landlord can keep their property, they have less money to work with, so things are going to fall apart. So when your dishwasher breaks or whatever, they're not going to be able to come in and fix it in as timely a manner. And if it's a state-run apparatus, if it becomes a project that the city's actually running or filling in the gaps, now you have all of the problems of, if you have a problem, you're not going to a landlord that has a private vested interest in making sure you're a happy tenant. You are going to a state bureaucrat who will get around to it when they feel like it and apply these equity programs where certain people are prioritized over others. Remember, he said he's going to diversify the police force. Yeah. Well, that is the same program. That program, by the way, people don't know this, comes from a Soviet program called Korenizatsiya, which was what we would call inclusion today under the diversity and inclusion program. Within Korenizatsiya was a Russian program or Soviet program called Raznobratsiya, which means diversity. And it means to achieve unity in content through diversity in form. That's what Lenin said that it means. And so the goal is to bring in people who think the same. That's the unity in content, who look different or who have different ethnic backgrounds, which should ring very familiar. This is a Soviet program. He's literally saying that he's going to implement into the police force. You can assume in other sectors of the city, plus the rent controls, which will be touched by this as well, where the city gets involved in controlling things. Then he said he's going to raise the minimum wage to $20, which has the same economic impacts. Yeah. You can't artificially raise wages above the market value of those wages without causing people to go above margin, and therefore for things to start to close down and shut down, and in our day and age, automate. So what you'll have is, a higher minimum wage and nobody getting jobs.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen that with the minimum wage for fast food in California. Places have been closing down left and right. And we have a lot of restaurants lately here in Minneapolis that are either moving or just shutting down. They cannot afford Minneapolis anymore, and they don't want to deal with the crime. And I'm sure they don't want social workers answering some of those calls.
The socialists can run this like a hamster wheel, right? As things get worse and more expensive, they can say things are getting worse and more expensive, and we can fix it. But the fact of the matter, and this is a broad principle we all need to be articulating right now, is that the government cannot create prosperity. The government can only move existing prosperity around. Yeah. And so the old saying about socialism being not just unworkable and impractical, but immoral, which is that eventually you run out of somebody else's money, is true. The government cannot produce prosperity. Every attempt for that to happen anywhere in the world so far has always failed. It cannot do it. So what you have to do, even in China, where they have a fascist model running under their communist system, the government's not producing the prosperity there. What's actually producing the prosperity is the profit motive that they allow corporate leaders to be able to pursue.
It's scary. It's fascinating. Here's the big question from my point of view. So we see Mamdani in New York. We see this guy Fatah in Minneapolis. This is not a one-off anymore. This is not unusual. This is starting to creep, if you will, throughout the country. Do we have to hit rock bottom? Do we have to, and if people do leave Minneapolis, and I agree with what you just said, that if things get worse, the government's going to say, well, we're the only ones who can make it better. We got to keep taxing the rich, yada, yada, yada. You're going to have the rich, wealthy people leave. You're going to have states like Florida flourish as long as they can stay on track. I just wonder where we're going to wind up, or are we going to check this in time to prevent it? Or, is this the beginning of the end?
Well, what you just described with people leaving is why socialist countries have to build walls to keep people in rather than borders to keep people out. Nobody's trying to get into a socialist country. None of these guys want to go live in a socialist country. Even Mamdani said that if it doesn't work out, he can go back and live with his parents or something to that effect, right? His very wealthy parents. So it's, this is an inexorable law of socialist decline. What we're going to see is, first of all, I don't know the answer to your question, but another thing we're going to see is that this model that Mamdani piloted and now this Fatah guy is copying is going to roll out everywhere. This is going to be woke left 2.0. Everything that we just fought with all the identity politics is going to get put a little bit on the back burner. It won't go all the way away, but brought up to the front is going to be all this economic stuff. And it's going to be a ton of young, high energy, smiley, relatively good looking people who are going to have this very youth-oriented campaigning, largely because they can do it virally on TikTok and on social media, but also because, frankly, the boomers are aging out. We now have millennials outnumber boomers in a lot of places where in the electorate, in a lot of places in the country. And this trend is obviously by nature going to continue. And so the younger generations are starting to outnumber the older generations who are horrified by this at the ballot box. So they're going to appeal to that. The Democrats are, like all grifters, just a couple steps ahead of the curve. And so we're going to see this everywhere. Will we hit rock bottom? I think we're going to see actually probably a bit of both. I think we'll see it fought back and rejected in some places, but in other places, we're going to watch our cities turn into basically college campus fun parks for, maybe a decade, and we're going to watch them rot from within. And whether or not we wake up as a result of that, I don't know. The big scare is what's going to happen in 26 with Congress and in 28 with the president. If the Democrats are able to marshal this energy and the Republicans can't get their act together in between, the only person in the entire Republican apparatus that seems to have his act together is Donald Trump. If we can't get our acts together before 28, this is going to be a national project. And if you thought Biden was a problem or Obama was a problem, you've seen nothing yet. Just wait till what's coming.
Yeah, it's a little terrifying. On that note, before I let you go, recently heard Charlie Kirk, who, Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action, has said that he believes there is a groundswell of conservatism among young people. What do you make of his assessment of that movement?
Well, the data show this, but the data use in my opinion, insufficiently granular definition of conservative. I think there is a groundswell of conservatism in both the United States and in people, especially under about 50. And it's particularly prominent in people in their 20s. But the problem is that it's also very radical. I've been in quite a bit of trouble for calling it a woke right that answers, the woke left. So rather than focusing on the idea of building prosperity and individual liberty and all of the things that have made America great so far so that we can apply those and make America great again, they're leaning into their own identity politics, and they're leaning into it's a very common opinion among Gen Z males who identify as on the right wing or conservative to believe that maybe a dictator wouldn't be so bad. Yeah. So while the data that come out and show, if you just had to pick between conservative and liberal, which are kind of both misapplied terms here, show that there is this groundswell. There's also a very radical contingent on the right that if we don't actually pay attention to this is how we lose 26 and 28 completely, because everybody's rightly horrified by that behavior, the identity politics in particular, the anti-Semitism, which is basically the definition of being on X now, is dealing with anti-Semitic and racist content on the daily basis. This will sink the Republican ship before the next stage of MAGA, whatever that looks like.
Whew. I was hoping I was going to feel really a lot more optimistic, but now I'm just on my guard even more. But James, Lindsay, it's great to see you and always good to get your analysis. Again, check out New Discourses, and we've been showing your Twitter handle, your X handle, I should say, and all the rest. So follow him. It's great, great, great information. And just apply yourself for 10 minutes every day to learn something about stuff you don't know. It's really empowering. Be brave, do good. I'm Michele Tafoya. Thanks for joining me and James Lindsay, and we'll see you next time. Hey, you can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.